Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Catherine Ryan Howard. Catherine is an internationally best-selling crime writer from Cork, Ireland. Her novel 56 Days was named a best thriller of 2021 by the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Irish Times, was her second Irish #1 bestseller, and won Crime Novel of the Year at the Irish Book Awards. Her previous work has been shortlisted for the Edgar Award for Best Novel and the CWA's John Creasey New Blood Award and Ian Fleming's Steel Daggers, and she's been shortlisted for the Irish Crime Novel of the Year multiple times. Her work has been published in 19 languages, and a number of her novels have been optioned for screen. She lives in Dublin. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much. That was a lot, I know, to read out, but it
Well,
sounds really good when you put it all together, but
it
it took
does.
so many years.
Well, it's very, very impressive. And only Catherine knows that it took me 2 tries to do that. We had to start over. It feels like a Monday here, but it is not Monday. So,
I actually
well,
have a very Monday feeling today as well, so don't worry, don't
okay,
worry.
I'm not alone. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So, welcome, Catherine. It's great to have you. I devoured the trap, and actually, I got a chance to listen to it,
Oh,
which was really, really fun. The voice of the gentleman is super creepy. I'll leave it at that. If you're somebody who likes to listen to audiobooks, the voices in this one are really, really well done. So, tell our listeners about the trap.
so the trap is essentially about Lucy, whose sister Nikki went missing about a year ago when the novel begins. And she is stuck. You know, the official investigation is going nowhere. It feels like the media isn't really paying attention to her sister, and paying more attention to the other women who have gone missing. And she's just reached a place where she's absolutely desperate. And so she kind of decides to take matters into her own hands. And essentially, the novel is asking the question, how far would you go if you just had to know? So Lucy is in a place where the obsession with finding out what has happened has just overtaken the grief. And she's so desperate for answers, she's willing to play bait for the man who took her sister, just because she has to know what happened.
Yes, and it's interesting. It's a very compelling premise. I want to sort of dig into sort of the different ways in which people respond to this kind of grief, because the not knowing can really literally be crazy making, right? I mean, I think that's what the story is about, and it feels very genuine and authentic to me. But before we get there, I want to see if you can tell us. Do you know, what was the inspiration for the story? Can you remember sort of where the seed started?
Usually for me, ideas, and like I've heard this from other writers, they kind of come from two separate places and like meet in the middle. And for me, one place was the novella The Vanishing by Tim Crabbe, which is about similar themes. A man's wife goes missing, and even though I think like it's about 5 years later, the love for her is kind of dwindled because they didn't get on that well. But the obsession with finding out what happened has only gotten worse. And he plays a game with himself in which he says, I'm given two choices. She's dead and I find out every detail, or she's alive and well and happy and I can never know. I choose she's dead, because he's just that desperate to find out. And that little passage struck me like so hard when I was reading it, and it's always stayed with me. And then here in Ireland in the 1990s, we had what we call the Vanishing Triangle, where essentially 8 women over a period of 5 years disappeared without trace. We're here 30 years later, and we still have no idea what happened to them, which is incredible in a country the size of Ireland. And, you know, I can't stress how like unusual this was. Like at the time, this was a country where, you know, if you had one murder in the news a year, it would be big, it would be unusual. So I was a teenager during the 90s. So when I started paying attention to the news was that women were missing. And I just can't believe we're here all these years later with no answers. I don't know how their families get through like even a day, let alone decades. And so I think when it came to the trap, those two things, the vanishing and the vanishing triangle, sort of came together. All my ideas are usually sparked by something in a real case or in real life, and then I kind of take it and I sort of use fiction to answer questions that like real life just cannot or will not.
Right. I think that, you work through your own sort of questions, and it's fear, right? I think sometimes we write
Yeah.
about the things that scare us the most. Well, in your author's note at the back of the book, you talk about the sort of pivotal thing that happened when you were a kid that kind of led you down this road. So can you share that with us? Because I thought it was such a great story, and I can't picture this machine, so I'm hoping you can
Oh my
really
God.
help.
Okay, so I mean, I don't even know if you imagine sort of a carry-on case.
Okay.
It was about, in my imagination, it was that big. It weighed 30 pounds. I know that for a fact, this VHS machine. And it was silver. It was JVC was the maker. And there was top loading. So a little thing flipped up and you put the VHS in. And the buttons were like piano keys sticking out the front. So it was this monstrosity. Like, I don't even know, where it came from or how they ever made them that way. But yeah, so I had carte blanche at the local video rental store. I should point out I was about 10 at the time that this is all happening, 10 or 11. And after working my way through the children's section, it was a very small shop and I watched a lot of videos. So it happened very quickly that I ran out of options. And I moved to the other side of the store, which had True Life. For some reason in Ireland in the early 90s, that meant all America's made-for-TV movies about like infamous crime. So like the Betty Broderick story and the Diane Downs story and the Melendez brothers and the siege at Waco, like, and I just consumed them all. I devoured them. That's what I was doing when I should have been watching, like,
Disney
or
Disney.
Yes.
So you said that your dad or your parents bought this machine that was so massive, and were they big movie buffs? Like, what was the?
No, like this is what's so crazy. Like, I actually don't remember them watching anything. I really don't. Like, it's funny, no one has asked me that question. I don't remember them watching anything. I suspect, they got a deal or like someone suggested, and I suppose the beauty of it is that you could record television, and maybe that's why, maybe that was the novelty, that like, they wanted a VCR machine so they could record stuff they missed or something. I don't know, because they are not movie buffs.
That's so funny. Well, maybe they were recording, the news or something on TV.
Yeah.
But that is funny because you talk about it, and I oftentimes read the author's note first, and sometimes that's a bad idea because there's occasionally a spoiler in there. But I always love reading the author's note because I think it gives you some character about the author, obviously, which gives sort of a different insight into the book. But what I love about this is you said this, like you described this thing, like you said, it's like a huge machine, and also that it was quite expensive. It was like the real investment that your parents made, and that it was, this monstrosity, and that you, like you said, that you were like so young. So do you suppose that's how? I mean, you seem to still remember all these cases, so clearly they are really imprinted in your brain, and so. And you said this book was based on a case from the 90s, so it really is kind of, they just come into your brain. And do you find yourself scouring the news now are you always sort of on the lookout for like the next seed?
Like, I mean, I'm not sort of like, I'm not scouring the news looking for an idea. It's that I am reading all these stories anyway, like I love a good kind of long read, like give me a nice Vanity Fair or, Vulture article. And I'm watching all the documentaries, I'm listening to the podcasts, not a lot of podcasts, because I find a lot of them, I don't like the style with the way they deal with crime fiction or with true crime rather. I think it's a bit like, some of them are bordering on disrespectful, and I kind of don't like sensational, and I don't like speculation. I want like hard facts. I want ideally to be reading about something that's already been solved, so there isn't these hours and hours of speculation. But then little things jump out at me, like in my very first novel, Distress Signals, I had read about a woman who had disappeared from a Disney cruise ship. And that was a tragic story, but there was one phrase in the article the International Cruise Victims Organization that set me off Googling, because I've never been on a cruise and will never go on one now. But
Not now.
they won't let me on, I'd say, anyway, after that book. But, you know, I went Googling and I found out like all this horrendous stuff about maritime law and how essentially, effectively, if you go on a cruise ship, you're vacationing in a country that has no police. Like, because if anything happens, they have to travel to the ship and loads. I could talk about maritime law for half an hour, but I won't. And that led me to my first idea for a thriller. So there's always these little things, and you know, you're kind of solving a mystery for yourself. If there is an unsolved case, you can come up with an explanation for it to kind of put your mind at ease almost.
Yes, yeah, I do think that that makes, yeah. So you're done with cruises and no big yachts for you either. It sounds like I
And
would
yeah,
be the,
and no Airbnb. My third novel was about things going on in Airbnb. Basically, I'm just trying to ruin summer vacations for everyone, so my vacations will be cheaper.
That's right. No one will want to go anywhere. You're like, I have the choice of anything I want to do. So
Yeah, driving the prices down over here. That's what's good.
that's right. One book at a time. I love that. Well, and I was telling you before we got on the air that I've just been in Ireland for the first time, and what an incredible country. But what you mentioned is really true. Like in America, of course, as we all know too well, there's, murders are a dime a dozen daily, but your crime rates are so low that all of the things that have happened over there are really, and especially the fact that they're unsolved, that's super, yeah, that's very, very hard.
Yeah, and it continues to be a mystery why there are so many Irish crime fiction writers when our crime rate is indeed so low. But
well, maybe it's right. Maybe you just hear a little bit of what's going on in other countries and think, well, I can borrow a little of that. It's nice to read a crime novel when you're in Ireland because you think the chances of this happening to me are pretty darn low,
exactly.
which is lovely. You're like, I'm pretty safe, so I could just write about the most horrific crimes ever.
That's true. I never thought of it that way, but that is so true. Yeah, you're like, this is fine. This probably won't happen to me. Chances
That's
are.
right.
Chances
It's
are.
almost a fantasy novel in Ireland. I love that.
Thank God. Yeah.
So I know, thank God. If only I know. I wish, and actually, that's what my daughter was saying. Like, I'm going to live in Ireland, and I was like, I'm all for that because it seems like it'd be a lot safer than in America. But one of the things we sort of just alluded to at the very beginning is the ways in which people deal with. I mean, because so one of the things about this book is it does touch on all the families of all the victims. There are very different ways, obviously, that people deal with these kinds of crimes. In fact, in Nikki, the missing Nikki's boyfriend, Chris, continues to live in the house where they were living. That was Nikki and Lucy's parents' house, because he too is sort of stuck, right? I mean, she's gone and he is stuck. And I think that was really, really well done. The way some of the parents really just want to, see every newspaper, talk to everybody, and others just want to sort of, especially as time goes on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
It's just always fascinated me, like what happens, because I used to read a lot of thrillers and crime novels about missing people, and you'd have like a prologue where the person goes missing, and then it would skip to like years later or months later, and I always wondered, like, stay with it, like tell me what happens in the immediate aftermath. And that was something actually in Distress Signals, my first novel as well. I wondered, like, at what point do you go to the supermarket? At what point do you say, well, I have to pay my bills? Like, life goes on, but with this incredible trauma that, I don't even know how in real life people deal with. And so speaking of the boyfriend still living in the house, like, what if he leaves and she comes back? Like, what if she comes back and he's moved on? But, they just don't know. And that's why I find this such a fascinating subject, like emotionally, because you are literally stuck. You are in a limbo. For all you know, the person is still alive. They might come back, deep down, you probably know the chances of that are low, but you don't know for sure. So at what point, without closure, can you say, well, this is in the past now and we're all moving on? And like, one of my favorite scenes in the novel is where all the families meet,
Yes.
because
Very powerful.
I was thinking of, and bear with me here, but I was thinking of the Stephen King movie, The Mist, which is about, I can tell by your face, you're like, where is she going with this? But hang on, I promise I'll get there.
I
It's
trust
about
you.
it's about an alien invasion, but the point of that movie is no matter what happens, your biggest problem will be other people. Your biggest problem will be your neighbors and whatever else, because people are the worst. And so I hate this idea that even if everyone is joined by this trauma, like they're all lovely and they're all nice and they're all cooperating. You only have to read about something like the 9/11 memorial, you know, the design of that and the agreement of what that would be like, to see what happens with these families and to see the discord that arises, because you don't change who you are just because there's been some trauma. So there's like, you know, one of the families, as you said, just wants to, you know, they just can't handle it and they just want to
Right.
retreat, and someone else is very media friendly,
Yes.
and her daughter's image is very media friendly,
Right.
and she's
Right.
out there taking advantage of that, not because she's a bad person, but she doesn't really care about the other families, because listen, she's dealing with the disappearance of her own daughter. Like, that's enough
Right.
for her. So I
Right.
just wanted things to be realistic. You know,
Yeah.
I wanted there to be a bit of realism about it.
Yeah, and that's actually, you bring up you sort of triggered another thought for me, which is the idea of, that basically how the victim looks really changes how, the world views her worth, particularly for women, right? I think this is really, I mean, it's probably
Yeah.
true for men too, but women go missing so much more that's where our attention's always pointed. And Nikki is like the picture that Lucy chooses, they want one that's the most recent because it shows her purple hair. And so it is very much not a hugely flattering picture. Doesn't show her as the sort of buttoned up good girl like the other one who goes, missing, whose mother's, like you said, media friendly. And so all of a sudden you have this, this perfect child who's, was a great student and an athlete and and like, all those sort of, and so she gets all that attention because of course everyone wants to find her because she seems like, and she was younger, right? I mean, she was only 17. So that's another factor. Of course, I mean, not that any woman at any age should go missing, but
I know, but this is what happens. Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
We like triage our, our attention because I mean, especially for, where it's happens all the time. And that was, I thought, really interesting too, is that Lucy has to contend with the fact that her sister deserves to be found and saved, but she was not an easy human and she didn't really have her shit together. And so she deals with the sort of the judgment. Can you imagine, like, your sister's gone, and on top of that, everybody's judging who she was.
Yeah. And, I've seen that like in real cases here where, we say don't speak ill of the dead. So obviously if something happens to someone, you're not going to say she was actually really annoying and she owed me loads of money and she, you're obviously not going to say that. But I think we go over the top in some cases. So like you'll hear victims described as, she lit up every room that she walked into and all this kind of thing. And in isolation, that's not hurting anyone. But if you're talking about a series of missing women and, presumably we want them all found and some are getting more attention than others, that's difficult. And I was also thinking about like the official pictures of those women, the women who went missing in the 90s are burned into my brain. And I think every woman my age in Ireland can recall those photos. And I remember seeing a video of one of the victims, like a very blurry, like old VHS, like, video camera that her parents took, presumably. And I was shocked because she didn't look anything like I thought she looked like. Because it's like when you meet someone who you're like Twitter friends with or something, and you've only been looking at this one angle of them, and then you meet them and you're getting all the angles and they look totally different. So I was kind of thinking about that as well, how, we have this one picture that's been chosen purely because that's what she looked like when she went missing. But we have to like imagine a whole life, then that photo has to carry the weight of a whole life, and it can't possibly.
No,
so I was thinking about that kind of stuff as well. Yeah.
And I mean, really it is about too that there's also this idea with missing women is, was she drunk? Did she sort of ask for it? Which I think is it's incendiary to talk about a woman getting abducted and somehow she's at fault in any
Yeah.
way. And I think
Yeah.
that's another theme in the book, is that, that some, that, well, she, and even we get the point of view of the, serial killer, serial abductor, we'll say.
Yeah.
And it's, and he too it's this sort of sense of like, well, she look where she put herself, like she's clearly, or we talk about women who, are sexually assaulted, well, that she was wearing a short skirt, like what, like how does that have
Yeah.
any real, but of course it absolutely does. There's another line I really love in the book, which is where somebody told Lucy to pick a picture that maybe she wasn't super attached to, because it becomes, can you explain that, because I you'll do it better
Yeah.
justice than I.
So I was reading a book written by a man whose son had been murdered, and he was talking about when the police came to him and, they want to release a picture to the press, and he's like, this is my favorite picture of my son, and they said it can't be that one, because you will hate this picture, you will come to detest this picture, so pick one you don't love. And I just thought that was absolutely heartbreaking. So I was thinking of that. Like, I don't think Lucy's situation is different, because she actually has very few photos that could even fit the bill. But I just thought that was something, I'm always like looking for the things that we don't typically think of in these kinds of situations.
Yes.
And I think it's like those little details that just, like, when I read about things like that, they don't leave me. And I just think, to make it as real as possible, because it's not the way, it is on TV, and it's not the way it is in the movies, and it's not the way it is in sort of like older crime novels. Like I'm really always pushing for something more realistic, even though sometimes readers are like, that would never happen. And I'm like, what you think should happen is based on other people making stuff up.
Right.
So,
Yes, I know. They're like,
Yeah.
it's unrealistic. You're like, well, actually, that's more like how it really happens.
Reality is very unrealistic. Really.
I know.
Yeah.
Truth is stranger than fiction. It's true. But I love that. And I think you do that really well. There's a lot of little, moments where I was like, wow, that is and I, like you, I've read thousands of, suspense novels over the years, or maybe 1,000. It seems like a lot, but anyway, a lot of them. And that was a new thought for me, and I appreciate that. I think that's lovely how you sort of pull these little threads in that, that people haven't mentioned before. Like you said, you're sort of looking for something that's a little fresh. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of your process? Are you, when these two vanishings came together and created this idea for you, do you plot it all out? I'm always curious to know who are plotters and who are pantsers.
So I'm sort of, this is funny, okay, because like I always said I was a plotter, but then a couple of years ago, I started getting really annoyed with the sort of divide between plotters and pantsers.
Yes, fair.
Yeah, what happens, I find, is if you're doing like an event, like you're at a book festival or something, and you're on stage with a pantser who doesn't know they're a pantser, because they would never deign to call themselves something like that, but
organized
they're
enough,
like,
right?
Yeah, they're like, I just, follow the story. Like I'm, I couldn't plot everything out. It would stifle me, like blah, blah. And I'm just like, But what I realized is that, like, there is no such thing. There's no difference between the two of us. We are all taking a blank page and making up something to put on it. And so some people make up the story by writing a first draft. And some people like me make up the story by opening an Excel spreadsheet and like filling in the major plot points. And then that spreadsheet gets more and more dense as the time goes on. And that spreadsheet gets more and more color coordinated the closer my deadline is, for no reason whatsoever other than it wastes
it's a good distraction, right? Right.
But we all have a stage where, like, I just find it really funny the way people talk about plotters as if we're sort of writing by numbers, or we're, doing something like that.
Yeah, there's nothing about this that makes it easier.
Unfortunately, no.
Yes, right. Because obviously if there was an easier way, we would all be doing that, right? I mean, there's no
Yeah.
question. I also love a spreadsheet. I have to say, I love a spreadsheet with the points of view in different colors and
Yeah.
the plot points, and sort of I keep track of the time. And I
Yeah.
would say I'm a pantser-ish or whatever, but only because I don't know what the beats will be or the twists until I kind of get there. But that's not, like you
Yeah.
said, it is different versions of the same thing, but it is
Yeah.
interesting to know. So basically you're going back and forth between the writing and the spreadsheet to kind of fill,
Yeah.
or
And
you get one
that's
done.
exactly what I'm doing. I'm going kind of back and forth, and I'm filling in. Like usually when I start, I will know what the ending is.
Okay.
Excuse me, because I find it impossible to do any sort of like twisting or revealing without knowing what
Yeah,
I'm
that's
trying to
fair.
hide,
Fair.
And so with the trap in particular, I absolutely started with the ending, and anyone who has read the book will know, that I had to. But what happens is I will have a good idea of the ending. I'll know the start, because that's what we all do. When we have an
Yes.
idea, it's the start we're thinking of. And then
Yeah.
I also try to have a midpoint. So I
Okay.
try to have something in the middle, like just to make it easier psychologically. I don't have to go like 80 or 100,000 words. I only have to go 40,000 or 50
Yes.
to get to that
Yes.
midpoint.
Yes.
It's all about sort of tricking yourself into thinking
It
you can do this.
right. Right. Because it's so hard. It's like,
And it
can I?
doesn't get easier. It doesn't get
No.
easier. The only thing I've learned, like this is my seventh thriller, and the only thing that has gotten easier is convincing myself that I can do it. I
Yeah.
still don't find the process any easier. I just find it slightly easier to believe that I will get there.
Yes.
So yeah, anything that can help us, I'm there.
Totally. Well, I hate to burst your bubble, but I interviewed Sandra Brown, and she said she starts every book. She has to look at her bookshelf and be like, "Okay, Sandra, you've done this 100 and blah 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 times. You can do it again." And I'm like, "Oh, that is not encouraging, Sandra. What? At some point, we have to know we
I
can do
find
it."
that strangely comforting.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Well, it is. I mean, I think that's right. We're all in it. But I
Yeah.
totally appreciate, and I love the idea. I mean, I think that knowing but it's like you said, it doesn't make it easier. I mean, it's still word by word, and you probably still write things that end up having to be yanked, and you've gone.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I definitely go wrong. And usually what I do is I write, like, I don't know anyone who sends their editor what I send them in the first instance. Like, I stop typing and I send it off. I send a really, really raw first draft. And usually my first draft is like, okay, this proves the idea is good, and also that this is not the way to tell it. So my
Yeah.
first draft is almost like, okay, that's not what we're going to do. And
Interesting.
that sort of like unlocks for me the way to do it, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
I mean,
Yeah.
so that's like, like Gillian McAllister. There's a lot of people who sort of write the whole book, trash it. Claire McIntosh
Yeah.
talks about this too, and then just like starts from a blank page. And I'm like, what?
I will say I've heard Gillian literally trashes it. I don't. I
Yes,
keep it.
yes. And then
And I will be copy and pasting some stuff in
yes,
if I can.
yes, yes. But you
Yeah.
are sort of rebuilding it. I mean, you
Yeah.
start with start with a fresh document, and you sort of bring things in
Yes.
as they can be used. And your editor helps you
Yeah.
sort of envision how it will work, or you feel like you finish that first draft and you're like, okay, now I know how I need to tell it,
Well, my
or
editor said
both.
to me recently that I'm really good because I send like my own editor's letter, in the sense that like I will send them that first draft, and then I'll send them a list of like, I know all these things are wrong, and I will like lay it all out. And like what I'm looking for is like what I haven't seen.
Yes.
And then they will, come and they'll point out things like I would never have thought of, because that's what editing is all about. And you just
Yes.
cannot read your work like a reader. So you need
Nope.
someone else to tell you. But then I go away. Like in this book, we didn't even have a conversation. I was like, they sent me a document and I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm going to go. And I just went and worked away. So I think that like what I will say has really helped me as a writer is at the very beginning, before I'd finished any novel, I went to a workshop with an Australian author who lives in Dublin called Monica McInerney. And she writes kind of these sprawling like family sagas. Like her shortest book is probably 120,000 words.
Oh my
And
gosh,
she
yeah.
said, she talked about trashing 60,000 words. And I was
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, if I had managed to write, like I was thinking at the time, 60,000 words, I would do anything to save them. And now I would totally trash them. Like, I think what has really helped me is, like, because I write quite fast, I feel free to ditch things. I feel free to ditch a draft or ditch half a draft or whatever. And therefore, I'm never trying to like save what I've already produced. I'm free to start again and make it as good as it can be. And like, everyone works differently, and that's what's great about this and why I love listening to like other writers and how they do it and stuff. But that's the way I have to do it, I have discovered.
I mean, I'm an overwriter, so there's 40,000 words I lose at every book. Every book I take a wrong
and I'm
turn.
like, I'm trying to like put in extra words to make up my
I know. I don't know. Yeah, I just finished
I'll take some of your words and then we'll be fine. Yeah.
It's 113,000 words. It's way too long.
Whoa,
so I'm trying. I know.
Whoa. Yeah.
I know. And that was me like trimming it down from like 120. So
I think that's a good problem to have. I'd love to be able to be in a position where I'm trying to trim instead of like trying to put in another.
I don't know. I think I'd probably prefer to have your situation, but isn't that the way it works too, right?
Far away hills, always.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like, oh, that seems better. No, it's like you said, it's all the same, but in a different, we're all taking it a little differently. Yeah. So, well, it's really interesting here. So do you have like are you working in your workspace right now? Do you work from home? Do you go out? Do you have a sort of time of day that works?
I work right here. So I'm at my very pink desk looking at my pink computer it's on Instagram if anyone wants to go look, but it's way too pink for a crime writer, but not changing it. And I work from home. Yeah. You have to lighten the load somehow when you're writing such dark things. Yeah. So,
exactly.
Yeah. I work from home and I don't have a routine. My routine is totally dictated by deadlines. So I will start off with a long period of procrastination and like watching Netflix, even though I know I shouldn't, and saying, I'll get started tomorrow. And I'm doing all my graphs and my good intentions, and I'm going to write this per day and that per day.
Right.
And then it builds into a sort of panic. And then I always say that I start work at the exact moment where the fear of writing something crap is overtaken by the fear of not having enough time to write anything. Yeah. So that's when I get going. And then towards the end, like I will write more and more. So like I'll go from writing maybe like or spending a couple of hours a day writing to like maybe doing a 10-hour day each day for a week. Like it's all about panic and deadlines for me. I need the deadlines.
Yeah, it's that, right, exactly. I understand that. It's easy to just want to rearrange your bookshelf. It seems very important to rearrange everything in the house.
And the laundry and cleaning. You can't possibly work if there's a bit of dust over there. So
That's right. You got to get out the duster and the vacuum. And but I usually like to get into drawers that haven't been touched in years. I'm like, well, this drawer, I need to go through my sweaters right this second.
Immediately.
There's no way I can write this scene until I know if I'm going to keep all these sweaters.
Like what's really funny is the writing is going well when the apartment is like an absolute bomb has gone off. And so the day after I send my draft in, I usually like sleep, and then I have my favorite day when I just have the whole day to clean, but I'm really cleaning. I'm not just avoiding writing. Right. And so it's the best of both worlds. But the messier the place is, the better the writing is going. So as you can see, there is no writing happening right now.
It's very tidy. It looks very, very tidy.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
Speaking then of what's next, what is next? What are you working on?
I'm in the second draft of the book that presumably will be out next year. I typically publish every year. So it's my first book that won't be set in the States. Will be set in the States. Rather.
I was like,
set in Ireland. Yeah. Okay. No, it's my first non-Irish set book, but it still involves Irish people. They just happen to be in a place in Florida, and it's about a ghostwriter. And I was thinking about O.J. Simpson's ridiculous memoir. If I did it, but I didn't. But if I had, this is what I would have done. But I definitely didn't do it. Wink. So that was kind of my starting point. So a ghostwriter who's hired to write maybe a murderer's memoir. is what
Maybe a
I'm working on
murderer.
now.
Got
Yeah,
it. I got it.
yeah,
Well, that
yeah.
sounds amazing. I love that the OJ Simpson. That was like, yeah. Was
Have you read the memoir? Because it is
no. I lived through it because
so,
I was like
yeah.
20 when all that stuff happened. So I was like right
Well, I was
front
like
row.
11, but I was still watching it. So.
Yes, you were. Well, you were. We don't know what your parents were doing, but you were watching it. Yeah. No, I haven't read it, but it sounds like it's a little.
It's really interesting because I'm sure you know that like the Goldmans, they went to court and they fought for the right, and then they published it. So the actual edition that's published has a prologue or a foreword by the ghostwriter about the experience, and it is really, really something. Like it's worth. I wouldn't bother reading OJ's
the book.
part,
But yeah,
but that prologue is fascinating.
interesting. I'll probably end up buying the book to read the prologue. It sounds really, or the foreword. That sounds really,
that's what set me off on this idea. Really was the prologue. Yeah.
I love that. I love that you pick these, just those moments of real stories, and they create a question for you, because that's really, I think, what this is like, what would you do, or how far would you go, or
it's curiosity. I think we're all like chasing our curiosity.
We are.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty fun gig when the panic isn't totally on fire.
Yeah. It's a fun gig for like the 2 weeks of the year where the book is out. You're given 2 weeks to not worry about the next book, and you get to do the fun launching and stuff, which is the 2 weeks I'm coming out of now. So today's the first day back at my desk, and I'm like, oh, I have to actually like write stuff now.
I know. I'm just looking at a major revision. So trust me, I'm feeling your pain. Is
that why your house looks so clean?
Yes. Well, also you can only see like above here. You're not getting it.
Well, what I can see is sparkling.
Yes,
sparkling.
exactly. Yes, there's definitely a lot of procrastination and denial happening here too. Plus it's summer. I find it very hard to work in the summer.
But every year I'm like, I'm not going to be writing next summer. I'm going to change my schedule. And every year. Yeah.
It never worked. I know. Usually I have a major revision in the middle of the summer. This year is a little bit later than the middle of the summer, but it's still a major revision in summer. And it's not, I'm in Montana. I should be doing major revisions in February, when it's like, freezing.
Yeah. What else is there even to do in February?
Very little. If you don't want to be freezing cold, there's very little to do. So, well, that is really exciting. Catherine, I hope someday you will come to one of our conferences over in the States. Have you been to a Thriller Fest or something? Yeah.
I haven't. And like every year when something happens, like I have major FOMO and I'm like, next year I'm going to go. But like one of the downsides of being in Ireland is that we have such a full like literary calendar of stuff.
Yes.
That the idea, we don't have to travel to go to anything, but I'm determined to, get to something in the States at some point.
Well, I have a bunch of friends who are talking about doing Bloody Scotland next year.
Oh, fab.
Which is just like sort of your neighbor.
Yeah.
So that would be fun. But yeah, there is, obviously you guys have it. And it's great. I was telling you before we started recording too, that I had spent the day a day by myself in Dublin, just going to the bookstores. And I think there were like 15 bookstores. Some of them are sort of, little, there's some used bookstores and some new bookstores and some big bookstores and some little bookstores. But I did make my way. I ended up somehow buying 2 copies of the same book accidentally. It was which clearly, anyway, it was all good. But it was really, what a lovely city. And I'm definitely coming back. So maybe I should be asking you which Irish crime things we should come to.
Well, we do have a festival here. It's actually run by my friend Vanessa, and this year it's happening in October, called Murder One. So we have like kind of 3 days of events. At the moment, the festival is being held in Dunleary, which is south of the city by the sea, absolutely beautiful. But I'd also recommend Harrogate. You must surely know about
I did, yes.
Yeah, I only got over Harrogate about a week ago, because it's so much fun. And like, if you were coming over this side of the pond to do something, I would highly recommend that, because literally everyone is there. Like no one goes to any panels because we're too busy catching up with.
Yes. Oh, that is right. So I will after visiting, I will take any excuse to come back. So I will put those on my I will definitely put those on my calendar. So this book is out. Remind me, I'm terrible with my
It's out already. It came out on the 3rd from Blackstone.
Okay. Well, so this book is already available to you, and our show will be live on August 31st, which means this book's been out almost a month. It's super, super fun, and you might have seen the very first chapter of it as a short story in Irish Times. I know I read that and was like, I actually did read it as a fully, a full piece, but then I was like, wait a minute, this is a whole book now, and it's very, very fun. So go grab this. And if you haven't read, Catherine, you have a lot. I mean, I know 56 Days was sort of was this blow up book for you, but you haven't, this is number 7, right?
Yeah. And like my personal favorite book of mine is The Nothing Man. And I think, and I'm hearing the same from readers, that The Trap and The Nothing Man are like similar vibes, let's say.
Oh, good.
So,
okay.
yeah.
I love that. Well, anyway, I devoured this, and I have a lot of Ryan Howard books to get caught up on now. Just, since I don't read very much, but I hope our paths cross in real life one of these days, because it was so fun to chat with you, Catherine, and congratulations on all your success. And if you haven't read one of Catherine's books, you must, and we will have a giveaway of this book on the Killer Women Facebook page. So keep an eye out for that as well. Catherine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It was so much fun. Really enjoyed it.
So much fun. We will see you next time on Killer Women. Have a great day. Bye.